This is going to be a lot more lighthearted of a topic and definitely something a lot of you guys can relate to, because I'm sure we all have cars that inspired us to fall in love with cars and made us pursue this hobby as car enthusiasts. Here are my 5 cars that made me become a car enthusiast. And I do have a quite obvious pattern, you know, I'm just gonna say it, supercars. That's the main thing I loved growing up as a kid. And you're all gonna have your own obvious pattern. Share them down below what 5 cars inspired you to be a car guy. But let's get into the first entry. The Dodge Viper GTS, as well as the Team Arica GTSR. The Dodge Viper 2nd generation, despite not having the quintessential side exhaust that Vipers are all known for all their other generations, to me is still the most iconic Dodge Viper to ever exist. The earlier Viper never really caught that kind of attention. It was more so of a magazine car, and you even rarely saw it on TV. The 2nd generation Viper was all over television, all over video games, and all over the internet. And this car, blue with white stripes, to me is the very reason why I love the color blue. I kid you not. My very decision to love an entire color is because of a car I saw when I was 4 years old. And it stuck in my head so deeply to what I would expect really cars to look like. If you subtracted every single classification of 4-wheeled vehicle and just told childhood me, name a car and what car was best car to car ever car, he would tell you the Dodge Viper GTSR. This is to him the coolest vehicle that just represents peak 4-wheel art, form, sound, feel, even though it was an absolute death machine, and childhood me did not know that whatsoever. He was completely starry-eyed and thoroughly romanticized with it, to the point that he probably would have grown up to be a fanboy in modern internet culture had you given, had iPads been a thing back then, you throwing one at me. If I'd gotten access to YouTube videos as a 4-year-old, I probably would have been a brain dead moron leaving comments, standing and white knighting the Viper. And that's probably why that's an issue with modern fanboy culture, because we definitely were not prepared for the internet. But to me, that car is the very reason I even got interested in cars, because it taught me that cars could be interesting. No matter how many toys I had or how many video games I played, every single goal was to get the Viper. Like in Gran Turismo 2, I didn't care about any other car in the game other than to get the Viper. When I finally got the Viper, my next goal was to get the GTSR Viper. That was literally the reason I even played any racing game, was if it had the Viper in it, I wanted to play it and I wanted to get the Viper in it. It became the very reason to chase after cars in general, and that's the blossoming phase of an enthusiast, someone who sees cars more than just A to B, but as a work of art, as a piece to aspire for, as something that has emotion behind it, memories, and all this blah blah blah. One of the cars that I loved in my latter years of being a young car enthusiast, so around early high school, I started to like the Gumpert Apollo S. The Gumpert Apollo came out around 2008, and I believe they made it in 2009 as well. And this chubby-cheeked warrior, I absolutely adored it. I had it as my wallpaper, I loved it. I have only ever had 2 video games I ever played that had it. Unfortunately, I didn't get hold of any Forza games because I didn't have an Xbox growing up as a kid, and Forza Horizon 2 back then was only available on Xbox. I did, however, get to use this car in Asphalt as well as Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2010. I knew the car existed before that, but I became totally enamored with it when I finally got to play with it in a video game, because it lets childhood you immerse themselves a bit more with it. The Gumpert Apollo, to me, I really can't perfectly explain my attachment to it, other than it was the first realization that I was going to be a nobody. And that is a very weird, painful thing to say even, but to me, I still wanted to be a somebody, and I think that's why people chase or even buy cars, and I think that's definitely part of the era I like this car. And being a teenager, being someone in high school, you're very turmoil, your emotions are all over the place. I was scared that I wasn't gonna make it in life, I wasn't ever gonna make money, and I still wanted a supercar. And the Gumpert Apollo was not just a supercar, it was at the time the Nürburgring record holder. So the Gumpert Apollo S was more of an emotional connection that I had with liking that car, because it was so cheap. They're not cheap now, unfortunately, because they're collector cars, but back then you could buy a new one for 225 grand. Even though I was like a high school kid who didn't even have that high paying of a job, the appeal to it for me was I could grow up, get a degree, and work in my life to someday obtain the Apollo S. Like, even if I end up being a nobody, I could try to aspire to be a somebody by chasing this vehicle. At the time that he saw this car, with its price tag, its specs, its appearance, appearance, it was romantic to him. It perfectly encapsulated what he thought his dream car should be. And that was, unfortunately, the final dream car I would have before I enter a very long fleeting enthusiast phase. And I don't know why I say unfortunately, because something beautiful happened during that phase. But moving on with this video though, when I was re-inspired to become a car enthusiast, it was solely because of, I guess, one vehicle that I allowed myself to unchain myself from and just see it for what it was, in spite of everything else. The Koenigsegg 1-to-1. The name alone means to have the strength to carry your own weight, to be 1-to-1, to not be a burden to anyone, to literally be strong enough to hold yourself up and hopefully eventually have the strength to even help others and carry someone else. This name honestly sold me on the vehicle more than anything, and to be fair, I always loved Koenigsegg growing up as a kid. I never loved them enough to consider them a dream car because they were unobtainium, but the CCX was the first one I kind of cared about. The Agera I thought was really pretty, and finally the 1-to-1 was peak Koenigsegg Agera, even to the point where they claim the RS is actually just a detuned version of it. And this is still what I consider one of the most beautiful cars ever. It is, to me, the absolute pinnacle of car, period. Of course, it's unobtainium. They've only made, I think, 7 or 8 of these. I have seen one of these in person, and I'm very honored that I could. And I have played tons of video games that feature this car, and as a college student, I was at a point in my life where having the strength to carry your own weight, having the name 1-to-1, captured me more, really, than anything else. But any other car that had 1360 horsepower, any other car that weighed 1360 kilograms wouldn't be relevant to me. It's only when you combine those two together and give it the name 1-to-1 did I realize how inspiring that is. It pushed boundaries. It was a total flag of rebellion. It stood boldly in front of Bugatti as a company because honestly, Koenigsegg overstayed their welcome compared to any other company that competed against Bugatti. Koenigsegg exists as a continuum, a very strange one run by a man who knows nothing about cars at the time that he started it, only to become literally the maker of some of the most jaw-dropping, most incredible vehicles in the whole world. Christian von Koenigsegg is very, very humble as a person, and his backstory is extremely a mix of everything. A mix of luck, a mix of curiosity, a mix of skill, and a mix of being in the right place at the right time, but having the right ambition for the right dream. And all of that was embodied with the creation of the 1-to-1, and that's why it brought me back into being a car enthusiast. The very sight of this car inspired me. And then, of course, after the Koenigsegg 1-to-1 brought me back into car culture, the shocking reality once again sunk in. The Vaydor G35 is the 4th car that I really liked as a car enthusiast, and again inspired me to even become one. This is a fake it till you make it car, and it's no secret that the most viewed videos on this channel, not anymore thankfully, but at the time when I first started this channel, and honestly for the first 3 years of it, it kind of haunted me, was the Vaydor G35. This car I initially liked because, well, I'll be honest with you, again, I got the shocking realization high school me got. I became nihilistic and started to realize I ain't gonna be anybody, and really most people aren't either. That I'm not gonna become a sudden magical millionaire. I probably won't even make several $100,000. If I do get hold of money, I might not be the greatest at saving it, or I might have some other pending issues in life that make me have to use them. The Vaydor G35 was a way to have a supercar styled vehicle for affordable prices. I immediately latched onto it for that because you can sell a lot of people on that dream. Look cool, pretend to be somebody even if you're a nobody, and that's a very horrible thing to admit. And I know some of you guys are like, you're not supposed to be a car guy for status, you're supposed to be a car guy. While I understand the point of being like car guide or obviously falling in love with cars, like I just gave you guys the whole speech with the Koenigsegg 1-to-1, right? That's a 1-to-1, all of which will have the endless fate of being jerked off to in a basement 6 stories under by some collector, never touched, barely driven. And to me, that's heartbreaking. And there's nothing I can do to control it, right? I'm not a 1%er. Heck, I'm not even a 0.1%er, because that's the actual people who own Koenigsegg's. In a way, I've said this in one of my unlisted videos on one of my secondary channels, but I'll say it here again. Sometimes to accomplish your dreams, you have to shatter your dreams. And that's literally why my channel symbol is the Ace Combat from the game, Shattered Skies. Because when you look up at the sky's the limit. That is your dream. When I first started this channel, picked this car to make a video on, and also picked that logo, it was me shattering those skies. It was literally me basically saying that I'm going to just accept the fact that I'm not going to be someone great. That's why the Vaydor G35 brought me back into cars. While I respect this car and always have a certain fondness or philia for its mentioning, and even to the point that I've had the honor of seeing a decent amount of these in real life at this point, and I'm glad that I have, because they're not rare cars. cars, right? They're built off of a G35 and they're still in production to this day. A different company bought the rights to it. So you can still buy one even to this day and assemble it in your garage. And that's the whole point of it. It's meant to be an affordable supercar. It's not supposed to be super duper rare. It's still more rare than most cars because it takes effort to put together, but it looks dashing, it looks cool, and it makes people, you know, drop their jaws, and it makes you feel like somebody. And for someone who felt like they were nobody their whole life, that's something that attracts them. Alright, so I'm actually talking in post right now because halfway through editing I was like, wow, I sound way more sad than I realized during the first initial recording. Know that I'm not actually sad. Please don't leave comments like, wow, that's kind of vain to like cars because of status and wanting to be someone, blah blah blah. I'm talking about these things in perspective of when I was actually that age. When I was a teenager and when I went through college and even part of my young adulthood, I cared way too much about what others thought of me. Don't act like you're above this. To some extent, we all struggle with this. I've obviously outgrown it now, and if you have trouble believing that, just know that my daily commuter is a freaking scooter. I really do not care what people think about status, wealth, whatever when they look at me on the road, because they're just strangers to me on the road. I stopped caring about impressing strangers. I stopped caring about what others would think or say about something that I just primarily use for point A to B, right? Why would I have to put all these wear and tear miles on such a nice Z06 when I can just ride a scooter instead? And honestly, I think it's fun. I love it. But even if you focus on the Z06, childhood me still probably would have been disappointed. He'd be like, well, it's not a cool car, it's the Corvette, or Thunder Corvette. And this is something I kind of want to address part of the way through this video. So I'm going to say it right now, the Z06, or rather the Corvette in general, is not actually the final entry of this video. It was not at all a childhood dream car for me. I didn't have any wallpaper of it, didn't have any posters, didn't use it as my screensaver, I didn't care, didn't collect model cars of it. Even in video games, I would only use the Corvette because I hadn't unlocked the Viper yet. So I really just didn't care about the Corvette. And part of me thinks that ties into this video even more. Truth be told, I hate who I was as a kid, and I think that's actually perfectly fine because little kid you doesn't know. They're stupid. They're a stupid little punk that has dumb expectations, who doesn't actually know how hard the world is, how difficult life is going to be. They don't even know what paying bills is like or paying a mortgage or all this other stuff. They're just a kid who just thinks they can just imagine something and it'll happen. And there's nothing wrong with that when you're a kid, because obviously to you as a kid, the sky's the limit. You can just dream of whatever, and you want to dream big in hopes that you someday make it big. And even if you don't make it big, even when you shatter those skies and look beyond them, like it's okay. It's okay to shatter your dreams. Because when those dreams fall apart, don't pick up the shards on the ground and try to put it back together. Look at what was behind what you just shattered. It's kind of liberating, actually. I guess to metaphorically describe how childhood me felt when he visualized it, it was like throwing a rock at the sky and watching it crack and break like a glass ceiling, only to realize what was behind it was more beautiful than what I had put up there myself. And when you look beyond the few things that got you to initially like cars and see everything in the world of cars, you realize that there are things that you never even would have thought you would have liked, but you've grown up to like. A good example is like, I know people whose dream cars or things that got them into car culture were Bugattis or McLarens or, you know, typical supercars, and then they grow up to own like a K car or like RX-7 FC or something like that. And that's humorous, but also very charming to know that they realize there's other cars in the world. There's tons of cars, in fact. There are tons of different styles of vehicles and different sections of car culture that may resonate more with them than what initially brought them into car culture. And that's part of growing up, honestly. And with that, we're going to move on to the final entry of this video, which I'm also now recording in post because I also thought that the original recording of it was kind of crap. The SLC from Superlight/RCR, the company changed names, I think, and the Factory 5 GTM. So I'm going to tell you the very stupid and brief reasoning why I like these cars. They're both good cars, by the way, but I like them because I wanted something that was as affordable as the Vaydor, but looked as cool as a supercar just like the Vaydor, but still weren't supercar prices like an actual supercar, but it can perform like a supercar. And that was the main reason. I was basically like, oh no, if I own a Vaydor, I'm gonna be a poser, therefore I should at least own a kit car that's cheap but still fast, so I can still claim to have the same stats as the supercar. If you followed along with anything I just said, you basically will know that once again this fell into the pitfall of caring about what others thought. But those were the 5 cars that got me into car culture, be it initially attracting me into it like the Viper or making me return to it like the Koenigsegg. What are your 5 cars that made you love cars or become a car enthusiast? And comment down below whether or not you actually still love any of those cars. I still respect all of these cars I talked about in this video, but I don't have a desire to actually own any of them anymore. I just moved on from it, and I think that's kind of beautiful in a way. And maybe for some of you guys who had more realistic dream cars, maybe you actually ended up owning one of of your dream cars. But like I said, comment it down below, like this video if you like it, share it to friends if you want to, I don't know, send them on an existential field trip, I don't care. Anyways, that's gonna be it. Other than that, thanks for watching, Blade Angel out.